Hi, my name is Allison Anderson and I'm going to be covering on-site optimization with you today. I'm going to be going over why on-site optimization is essential to showing up in search engine results, 3 key factors of on-site SEO, and what not to do, which is also known as black hat tactics, and lastly, a very important subject, which is assessing site performance. Why on-site optimization is important? Let's start off with an example. Say you want to search for running shoes. You go to Google, you type in running shoes, and you hit enter. Google then looks at your query, and based on the clues, it pulls relevant websites from its index, which consists of 60 trillion pages. Google then ranks the websites using over 200 factors, with some of these being site and page quality, freshness, content, ultimately ending with your results page. On-site optimization is important because it helps you rank. It helps you be found, it helps your click-through rate, it gets people onto your website and potentially ends with a conversion. The definition of on-site optimization is the factors of a website put into place to ensure indexability by the search engines. This includes, but not limited to, design, architecture, content, and keywords. Search engines look at sites and make sure they are valuable and unique, that they're easily viewable on all devices, that they're keyword targeted, socially shareable, and that they're safe. To make sure your site is optimized to show up well in searches, let's go over 3 key factors of on-site optimization. Those being site architecture and design, so the structure of your website, HTML and metadata, so the backend data that the search engines read, and content, which should be written for the user. I will go into detail of each of these in the coming slides. Starting with site architecture and design. I'm going to cover these 7 areas within there. Design layout, so where the buttons, images, content, call to action should be located. The navigation, how do I get to the next page? How do I get to that next step? The URL structure, are the file paths set up correctly? On-site linking, how are you linking from page to page? Device usability, can you view the website on your cell phone or on a tablet? Sitemaps, does the website have one and how is it set up? Page load speed, does the website take 20 seconds to load or am I able to view it right away? Let's start with layout and design. Design should be aesthetically polished. The color, the images, there should be minimal white space, and it should be all easy on the eyes. Design should also match the brand. The logo should be consistent. Other marketing materials should be consistent. Color should be consistent. When you think of McDonald's, you imagine those golden arches. The Nike, the Swish, everything all comes into play together, and it should also be reflected in the website. The layout should be easy to scan and important areas should be highlighted. For example, if you have a phone number, a contact form, whatever your call to action is on the website should be called out. Say you're offering for the next 50 clients a free gift card. That should be called out on the website. The design and the layout should be compatible with browsers as well. For example, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox. Your website should be compatible with all of these browsers and many versions of them. Here's an example of a bad design and a good design. The world's worst website.com. Seems fitting. It's not easy on the eyes, it's not aesthetically polished, important areas are not highlighted, and there is no real direction on where I need to go. So to go along with that, here's a good design. Here's an example of Apple's website. Important areas are highlighted in the top navigation. It's easy to look at. I know exactly where I need to go. And really, all the categories are summed up with the 7 areas in the top navigation. Another thing to take a look at is usability heat maps. There are tools on the web that you can test the user and see where they are most commonly looking. You can adjust as needed with your design depending on what your heat map looks like. In this example, the red is the most common area people are looking at. Depending on what you want the user to look at, you may adjust your design around these heat maps. Navigation. Navigation is to make sure that the user can find the next step, to figure out where they need to go next. In this example, Apple does not overcrowd their options, gives you a clear path on where you need to go with those 7 options that are listed in the top. Another important area is URL structure. The URL should be static, not dynamic, and the URL should be less than 90 characters. The content should also be unique to the URL, and if it is not, you should be using canonical tags. For example, if you have sort pages within your website, so going back to that original example of running shoes, If Nike wants their best sellers to be the main page that everybody sees and is indexed, but then you also have a way to sort the pages by size, by color, but ultimately you don't want Google to necessarily index those other pages. You would want them to just stick with the best sellers. So what you do is put a canonical tag on those other sort pages to basically reference back to that main page of best sellers. You should also have redirects into place for any URL changes that you have. For example, if you have Nike.com running shoes, but you want to change that to Nike.com women's running shoes, you have to make sure that those redirects are in place in the file. So if somebody were to ever find that old URL of Nike.com running shoes, they are ultimately going to land on the Nike.com women's running shoes. Also with URL structure, you should limit the characters that you have in them. As you can see, I have listed some unsafe characters that you should stay away from when making your URL structures. So question marks, percent signs, number signs, anything like that, try not to include them in your URL. So set up your URL structure with keywords. Here's an example of a good URL and a bad URL. You can see in the bad URL, it's using those unsafe characters, and in the good URL, it's very plain and simple what the URL is targeting. Onsite linking. Onsite linking are your internal links, which are links within the content that link to other pages of the website. So think about creating a path for the user. In this example, you link from the Nike homepage to the men or women or kids section of the website, and then those link to the shoes, clothing, gear. So you want to stick within those siloed structures. So the men, which then link to the shoes, you would not want to link the men then to women's clothing. Doesn't make sense for the user. They'd already clicked on men and they want to see the men's shoes. Also, you wouldn't start from the home page and link to the kids' gear right away. You'd want to give the user some sort of direction to go to kids first and then give them the gear from the kids. So as you can see, the green arrows being likely links that you would create and the red arrows not being likely links that you would create. Device usability. Your website should be equally easy to use on a smartphone as it is on a desktop computer. Responsive web design is also something to take into consideration when building your website. Some good examples of this are bostonglobe.com, graygoose.com, corporate.target.com. They all have responsive designs on their website. So depending on what you're looking at, whether that be a tablet, whether that be a smartphone, the website ultimately displays most optimal on that specific device that you're looking at. You should also avoid using Flash animation because it's not compatible with a lot of Apple's products. So usually try to stick to jQuery if possible. Sitemaps. There are usually two sitemaps built for a website. One's for the search spiders and one's for the users. The XML sitemap is for the search spiders, and in its simplest form is a file that lists the URLs for a site along with additional data, such as when it was last updated, how often it usually changes, and how important it is, so that the search spiders can crawl the site intelligently. The HTML sitemap provides an overview of the pages and the structure of the website for its users. The final area in architecture and design to think about is site speed. The more images, video, animation on the site, the longer it can take to load. The search engines do take page load speed into consideration when ranking sites. You also have to think about usability from a user perspective. You don't want your users waiting a long period of time to get to your site, or they're going to bounce. The second key factor in on-site optimization I want to cover is HTML and metadata. There are 4 high-value areas I'll go over, those being title tags, meta descriptions, meta keywords, and images. Title tags are a very important element of on-site optimization. Here are some screenshots on where the title tag shows up. When looking at a website, you'll see it at the very top of your browser and also in the tab. You can see it if you go to the source code and it's listed under title tag. Create your title tags with the most important keywords first and try to keep them under 70 characters. Keyword research also comes into play here, which I will cover later on. Meta descriptions are a summary of the web page and display on the search engine results page. There should be a unique meta description written for every page you have on your website. It is best to keep the meta descriptions between 150 to 60 characters. As you can see here, this is where the meta descriptions show up. You'll see them most commonly in the search engine results page, and you can look at them if you view the source code. Meta keywords were once useful, but now they're mostly irrelevant to the search engines. Meta keywords are used to display what you are targeting. You can include things such as nicknames, misspellings, geo-targets, and actually this area now is more helpful for competitive research. The final area in HTML and metadata is image. Images can be optimized and are readable by the search engines. Make sure to use keywords in the file names of your images, which is highlighted below in blue. Also, use keywords in the alt text, which is shown by the red arrow. If you optimize your images correctly, they can show up in Google searches. Content is the final key factor I'm going to cover, and it is still king. You want to keep it fresh, unique, and engaging. Write content for the end user and not for the search engines. Long content is great as long as it's useful and relevant. Frequent content updates are favorable. You don't want your content to become outdated or stagnant. I'll also explain headers and performing research with content. Jumping into headers. Headers are used within the content to tell Google what the content is about. They are considered high-value areas and can be broken out by H1s, H2s, and H3s. In this example, you can see the H1 and the H2. You can tell a header apart because they're usually larger font or bolded. You can tell specifically what H tag they're attributed to by looking in the source code of the website. Content research is very important when developing the content for your website. Understand your users. Look at the competitors' websites, see what keywords they're targeting, and also do your own research in the keyword planner. Look at what the average monthly searches are for your targeted keywords, and also understand the level of competition. The competition is categorized as low, medium, or high. You can see this in the diagram below. When dealing with content, you always need to remember to optimize the content for the user and not for Google. The next area I want to cover is what not to do in on-site optimization. Starting with duplicate content. Duplicate content is using someone else's content on the web as your own. It's basically plagiarism, and Google can see that. The next one is keyword stuffing. Keyword stuffing is an unnatural way of using all the keyword phrases that you're trying to target on your website. So here's an example of what this looks like. It's using the same term over and over again. So in this example, search engine optimization is used over and over again, and it doesn't seem natural. So Google sees that as keyword stuffing. Image heavy. Too many images and not enough content to tell you what the site is actually about. Heavy on-page linking. An overwhelming amount of links loaded on the page with multiple directions of where you're supposed to go. Here's an example of heavy on-page linking. On this site, everything in blue is a hyperlink. This is leading the user to click off the page almost immediately when reading the content. It also is hard to read and tells Google all these pages that I'm linking to are important. Cloaking is also something you should not do. And what this is providing content to the user that's different than what you're providing to the search engines. So for example, if you're to go to Nike and you type in running shoes, say in the back end of their page, they are telling Google that they are focusing on running shoes. If I land on that page and all I see is women's clothing, that would be cloaking. Another what not to do is too many ads above the fold. If there is an overwhelming amount of ads on a site that you have to scroll down to even find what the website is about, not good. Here's an example of what too many ads above the fold looks like. The fold being where your computer were to end. So as you can see, all of these ads are what you see in your computer screen. Anything below that, I would have to scroll down to see. Computer-generated content is also something that should not be done. What this is, for example, is taking blocks of content on your website, changing out a keyword or a geo, mass-producing that, and putting that throughout your website. It's not unique, it's not user-friendly, and the search engines can see that. The final section of on-site optimization is assessing site performance. When launching a website, it is very important that you are tracking the data with an analytics tool. Below, you'll see two examples of Google Analytics and Google Webmaster Tools. Both these tools are free, and I would highly recommend you put these on your website before launching. With these two tools, the tracking codes will be given to you, and you need to put them in the back end of the source code. You can see this in the example below, and you need to make sure that they are on every page of the site, including thank you pages or any secure pages that may not be easily accessible to a user. When looking at these tools to analyze site performance, there are some key areas to assess, which are audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversion. With audience, take a deep look at what the demographics look like. Where are people coming in from? So look at the geography. What is the behavior? What is the technology? And what mobile devices are people using? Is your website mobile friendly? With acquisition, look at traffic trends, referrals. With referrals, how are people getting to your site? So they're getting to your site from other websites. That's what you need to take a look at. Also look at keywords. What types of keywords are people using to get to your website? You can usually find this in Google Webmaster Tools. And also look at social signals that are coming in. Take a look at behavior. Look at behavior flows, site content. Look at the landing pages, look at exit pages, also site speed, like we had talked about before, and user timing. How long is a user spending on your website? Are they finding what they need to? Also look at conversions. Assess your goals. How many people make it to your contact page? How many people are submitting a contact form? The goal conversions are what you need to set up ahead of time in Google Analytics to be able to track those correctly. So assessing site performance is extremely important after launching a website, so you can adjust where necessary to make sure your site is better optimized for your end user. Thanks for watching the on-site optimization presentation, and I hope you now have a better understanding of why on-site optimization is so important, some of the key factors of on-site optimization, and what not to do when optimizing a website. And finally, the importance of assessing your site performance and understanding your users. Taking all these things into consideration when launching a website will help you perform and will help you be found.